Bardfest, but I'm going to do it that way. Okay. So welcome everyone to Berks Bards Earth Day focused poetry reading this April 2021. It's good to see everyone. And I'm Hiram. I am pinch hitting for the wondrous Patty Ross, who is the host for many of Berks Bards readings. Berks Bards is a very, very active collective of poets in the Reading, based in the Reading, Pennsylvania area, Pennsylvania, USA area, and has been hosting events galore over the many years. And here, of course, during the pandemic, hosting those events virtually. We're so pleased to have this international collective of poets today. I say international because we're joined by Dorina Jennings from Ireland, who will be our first featured reader. We have, I think, 5 readers here with us today. And we're just so pleased that everyone has been able to join us, I think, from the Midwest, from the East Coast, and all around. So why don't we go ahead and get started? What I'm going to do is introduce each of the poets. They'll read for about 7 minutes at each, and then assuming that we have a little bit of time at the end, we'll come back, circle back around, and see if there are any questions from folks in the audience, okay? So our first reader is adding the international dimension for our reading today. Dorina Jennings is from County Dublin in Ireland and has been writing from the age of 12. She writes about her early life, the echo of relationships in nature, and the tragic death of her son. She has written several short plays, memoirs, and short stories. These days, her main focus, however, is on poetry. She has delivered her work to live audiences in Chicago, in Sweden, in Wales, in Dublin, and a lot of other spots. Currently, she's working on her debut collection, and she's also been featured recently on Charlie Rossiter's Open Mic of the Air radio program. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dorina Jennings. And you may need to turn your volume up just a little bit on your computer because Dorina tends to be just a tad bit soft-spoken. So thanks, Dorina. You'll need to unmute.
Thank you, Hiram, for the introduction. Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and it's lovely on a Saturday evening to be able to talk to you from the other side of the world. I'm in Carlow, which is about an hour from Dublin. So I'm going to start off. I dug out my nature poems, and apologies if any of you have heard these before, but I'm going to start with a poem called Tulips. And a couple of years ago, can you hear me, by the way? Is the sound okay, or can you hear me?
Everything is fine, Dorina.
Okay. A couple of years ago in early December, I was sitting on my couch and suddenly got an idea into my head that I should do something. And I just thought, will I, won't I? It's just too late. And then I decided, well, if you don't try, I suppose it won't hurt to try. So this poem came out of that, called Tulips. A last-minute notion late one December evening. She hurried to the garden shed to gather bulbs, the light fading. She tossed aside uprooted narcissae in favor of tulips, new, sturdy-stemmed late bloomers. 4 months on, a planter of coral red tinged with yellow greeted her, overlapping curves like skirts cut on the bias, billowed outwards. By the window, she watched them, tight-lipped, secure, leggy, while hours of hot pulse sun ripened and seduced. Full lips parted, delicate, offering to the world stamens, pistils, and carpel for bees to suckle. The next poem I'm going to read to you is called Euronymous. So many years ago, I had a relationship with a horticulturist, a man who loved his collection of specimen plants, but he had a great draw for one in particular. It was his beloved Euronymous. He said it was worth waiting all year for this short-lived display of colour. So this poem is called Euronymous Zones. Late one autumn afternoon, he settled her in between his grandmother's peony rose and strawberry hydrangea. When April came, she opened with a simple dress of sapling green, wore it all summer long. As the seasons passed and his garden faded, she took a turn, flushed cherry and lipstick red, and for a few short days danced with autumn wind, rumba, samba, salsa, flirting and flame. For her final act, she shed her gown, leaving the lawn strewn with leaves upturned like lips, the memory of her kiss. The next poem I'm going to read is called The Clearing. Here in Carlow, all the charity shops have been closed for over a year now. But in the last couple of weeks, a large warehouse opened asking us to collect unwanted items. So I set about clearing presses I hadn't seen the back of for years. The Clearing. My sorting started in the kitchen, then the scullery, where I found and remembered the small childhood microscope, a working souvenir from the Natural History Museum. I had wanted to know what spring looked like. I had wanted to capture its essence between glass plates, rising sap, budding flowers, light and layers of hope. Dried tulip petal tip displayed like a wash of pink and peach paint over a lined copybook. A narcisse appears neat white, striated, delicate lemon edges, stamens like honey stick. And who would not be moved by the freshly picked geranium, cherry pink and plum folds, sprinkled with threads of silver light. This poem I wrote many years ago, and it's called The Apple Leaf. And I suppose it has many layers to it. A lot of my contemporaries have asked me to change the last word of this poem, but I haven't. And to date, I haven't found a more suitable word to put in its place, so apologies if it offends. The apple leaf. It catches me every morning. A quick glance through the French doors, the single leaf on the apple tree, wagging in and out. If I wanted to, I could mistake it for a bird. Light is scarce around the winter solstice, and my eyes play tricks that tease. By Christmas Eve, faith leaves me tired and frayed, tempting me to set you free. I cannot stay to watch you decay among the swell of leaves trapped in corners of the decking. Rain has weakened you, and with the afternoon, starlings appear. I imagine I hear them calling you to join the murmuration. I picture you soaring, all wings turned in unison, creating patterns familiar to art and physics, a phase transitioning from matter to love.
Rena, if maybe you have one more, that would be wonderful. These are terrific.
Okay, I have a short one.
Okay.
Okay. A few years ago, myself and a friend went down to a little fishing village in County Waterford called Dunmore East to have a picnic and take a sea swim. But just coming back through Kilkenny, on our drive back, we were greeted with a wonderful sight. So this is called Harvest Moon. Out of Kilkenny, a mile or so, it appeared, glorious, vibrant. In its face, you saw a woman. I saw the world. We discussed its tidal pulse, its pink tinge, like the polished surface of a delicate shell. Imagined it a beacon from another planet, beckoning us home. Thank you.
Dorina, you and your angelic voice, thank you for being here. It's just always more than a treat to hear you. My ears are grinning. And yes, in case people don't realize, Dorina is, I believe it's 5 hours ahead of us. So she's interrupting her dinner time to be here with us today. And we're so grateful to you. Hope you can stay on for a little while longer, Dorina, and hear some of the other fine poets.
I'd be delighted to.
That'd be great. Thank you for sharing your rich poems. Really appreciate that. So our next poet, and we welcome everyone who's joined us since Dorina started reading. Our next poet is Cara Valor. She's a poet, therapeutic emotional support teacher, and mother of 3 children. Her poetry has appeared in Grass Limb, Skinny Poetry Journal, Anti-Heroin Chic, Red Rose Review, Reclaiming Our Voices Anthology, and Bards Against Hunger, Pennsylvania Anthology. And her work is placed in the Writer's Eye competition in various Pennsylvania Poetry Society prize anthologies and York Fest, the York Fest literary competition in, I assume, York, Pennsylvania. Is that where you're based, Cara?
I am, yes.
Great. Cara, you've got the mic.
All right. Well, thank you for having me, Berks Bards, and Harem for introducing me. You threw me for a loop when you said we have a little more extra time. So I had my whole poetry all set out. But I think what I'll do, when I was looking at all of my poems and I pulled out my nature poems, I noticed I have a theme where I kind of gravitate towards water. So you'll see that kind of pop up in each one of the poems that I'm going to share with you guys today. The first poem is basically a poem, I would say, my take on Jane Kenyon's Let Evening Come. It's one of my favorite poems. So I guess you could say this is my version of that type of poem. It also was displayed in New York a few years ago. It was a really cool exhibit where there was an exhibit where a poem and a visual arts would kind of combine for a project, and it was displayed in New York. And I believe the visual arts artist that paired with me was Emily White. I believe she's based out of Lancaster. So that was kind of a fun project to do. And this is a poem from that titled A Prayer to the River. Let me forget the land. Let my boat chart through the prism. Let the marina blur on the shoreline. Let the eagle glide with me. Here, lying on you, I am weightless, quiet in the calm openness between above and below. Let me be still in your belly, where a river eel might ribbon me to muffle the ironworks of man. My second poem is titled Wandering. We devour buried, blunt kisses underneath burnt purple irises. Pine needle mountaintop plucks children whispering behind waterfall caves. The wide meadow holds wild horse restlessness and mice burrowed in grass. In breezy afternoons, Down by the river edge, bent cattails paddle softly. My third poem, I kind of share with you, Darina, that you had shared one of your poems and said that some of your counterparts had said to change one type of word. And I'm giggling because the next poem that I'm sharing, I'm seeing a friend of mine who's here popping up, Annie's little notes on this one poem. So I'm sharing that connection with you and kind of giggling in that process. This poem is titled Ancestral Calling. A friend suggested I build a prayer brick by brick, as if it were natural for an unchristened girl to float inside a carpenter's dream, hands knitted together in warm light. Those born unwanted are never cleansed by wafers and wine. I found my prayers in dark mud, swaddled in the amniotic fluid of swamp, where creamy muck absorbs through skin and rots the self-portrait, slows the breathing to the pulse of cypress. Strict of all human, I root myself under the canopy of my elders. Incantations of blessed water, veins that give life. I am home. I am prodded by the river, my gentle mother, to keep moving. And the last poem I'm going to share with you, it kind of seems strange now to be sharing it because we're in spring. This is actually a poem about the river that I live close to, the Susquehanna River. A few years ago, the river froze solid. And I had lived in this area my entire life and had never seen anything like it. And quite frankly, I was obsessed with it, and I would drive down every day to just marvel at this just difference that I've seen with the river. And I would drag my kids with me every day because I knew it was something that was just doesn't occur very often. So of course, a poem came out of that titled River Ice. In our many walks along the river, this one was different, slower. We were alone and as still as the landscape. It offered us nothing and everything. The bitter air stunned our movements. Snow crunched underneath our boots. Trees empty except for the tufted squirrel nests tucked in the crevices of the branches. My boys, too old to hold my hand, stand on either side of me and peer out over the spiked edges to the shards of glass beyond. The quiet current in the river's belly forced her to move. She groans as chunks of ice crack against one another, jutting up toward the sky that mirrored the Arctic whiteness of the water, casting a primitive blue. Thank you for having me, everyone.
Thank you, Cara. Wow. That last piece particularly, well, all of them wonderful. Last piece particularly powerful. Really appreciate you being here from York, Pennsylvania, USA. Cara Valor.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I also wanted to celebrate the fact that we've been joined by Sterling McKee, who is also going to be showcased. Sterling, if it's okay, I thought I would introduce Elliot as our next reader, and then we'll come back to you if that's okay.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Great. Thanks, Sterling. So thanks to Cara Valor for that reading, that presentation of her wonderful poems. Our next poet is Elliot Paul White. He's a writer and educator based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, USA. He organizes and hosts a monthly reading series called The Turning Wheel at Dogstar Books in Lancaster, which he's been hosting since 2015, so a pretty long-standing reading series. Elliot holds an MA in English and is an adjunct instructor at the Center for Creative Exploration at Pennsylvania College of Art and Design. His writing has appeared in the Schuylkill Valley Journal, in Song Dog Lit, Fledgling Rag, and elsewhere. So we'll turn it over to Elliot. Elliot, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Hiram. And thanks everyone for being here. Really lovely to hear your voices and to share this space, distributed space. It feels intimate from far away. So thank you. I think I'm gonna start because I was just going to read two, one of which is a little longer. So I'd like to start by reading a poem that I've taught with my students a bunch by Joy Harjo. It's called Don't Bother the Earth Spirit. And I guess a poet friend from DC taught me this trick, other people's poetry, OPP, which is a tradition that I like. Don't Bother the Earth Spirit by Joy Harjo. Don't bother the Earth Spirit who lives here. She is working on a story. It is the oldest story in the world, and it is delicate, changing. If she sees you watching, she will invite you in for coffee, give you warm bread, and you will be obligated to stay and listen. But this is no ordinary story. You will have to endure earthquakes, lightning, the deaths of all those you love, the most blinding beauty. It's a story so compelling you may never want to leave. This is how she traps you. See that stone finger over there? That is the only one who ever escaped. This next poem is from several years ago when I was able to take a trip across the Middle West and West and, you know, drive through the desert lands and drive through the plains. It's was written in response to a hike I took in the Badlands National Park, which is a kind of magical and insane landscape. It's called Notch Trail. The hard-packed white earth flakes as chalk bones beneath our feet, and I fantasize about dying of thirst. Watch for rattlesnake signs posted every few hundred yards warn us of nature's promises, mysterious destinies it deals out in venomous strikes. Yet another fossil display of mortality. But for now, observe with me the lower prairie from the upper. Survey the smears of sagebrush and geomorphic limestone cliffs, unfathomably wrought as if according to some madman's hallucinatory will. All this filtered through nothing, endless plains of wavering grasses. I fantasize again, but this time I'm hanging from the rock face, spending all my energy, stealing glances over my shoulder out toward the horizon, where clouds leave acres wide shadows miles beyond what can be seen. Here at the end of the trail, we can either turn back, tracing the way we came, or jump off this cliff and land out there among this beauty. Please, I need you to tell me what we should do. So, like Kara, I spend a lot of time thinking about the Susquehanna River, which is the widest river east of the Mississippi. It's a huge watershed. It's ancient and magical. And I'm on the other side of the river from her. So the beginning of this piece, this will be my final piece. It's a little bit long and it's a prose poem, a hybrid, sort of a lyric essay prose poem, still figuring out these hybrid forms. But it's called This Tangible Earth, which is a phrase that my wife spoke to me as we were discussing the earth on a hike in Shenandoah National Park. So lots of shout outs to national parks for me today. So this is called This Tangible Earth, and thank you so much for listening. We ride our bicycles along the floodplain of a river 340 million years old, older than the land it flows through, older than the continent itself. It is named for a tribe of extinct people wiped out 200 years ago by marauders who looked like me. Skin pale as bone, ruddy faces. No sufficient answer why. Too many insufficient answers, the crux of every mystery. And earlier this summer, we rattled out of the city down I-81 toward a named wilderness. We camped in the woods on top of a modestly high mountain, a southern section of the range that cast its shadow over me as a child. Those worn down mountains are now 480 million years old, older than my life, older than my life, my ancestors' string of lives, my species unfurling from phylum, order, family, genus, older than classification itself. When these mountains were born, there were no trees. Plants floated in the oceans, and the earliest tetrapods would not venture out of the sea for another 80 million years. Morning, we rise, dress, drink coffee, hike a trail leading to the top of a waterfall and string a hammock over its stream source, watching water flow over stones. We doze, read, eat dried fruit and nuts, giddy as children who have slipped into their father's garden. Every grooved moss rock, every ridged leaf edge, every scarlet songbird, every furrowed gray oak trunk rising tall and straight into the canopy, all these sing the splendor of this tangible earth. The sunlight, soil, water, and green things are the most perfect of all rudiments. Any other world should envy them. Any other being praise them. Here it is almost possible to forget it is a plague year. No real answers to the mystery of it. Only a certified bundle of false answers that ease the nerves as much as a shot of liquor before primitive surgery to saw off a limb. So many have sought refuge in forests, in deserts, in wild places, fleeing the smug and frantic world we created. As if we are owed a hearty, solid godhood with which we can make ourselves worthy to meet each moment. Later, we sip whiskey from a jar and tend a declining fire, cozying to its warmth and alert to the cold of the night on our backs. We talk of our lives, so intertwined. One of us looks up. The sky is scattered with splinters of ancient light, and each flicker tells my body it belongs to the earth. At the sight of the first shooting star, we are jubilant at our luck, and after a pause, we make our wish. At the second sighting, we know in the pulse of our flesh, this night has become almost holy. Palpable gratitude sobers exuberance into responsibility. One wish is a celebration, true. Yet two become solemn duty. The world is a mess in need of magic. We close our eyes, make another wish. As we settle into silence, necks pitched upward like baby birds waiting to be fed, eyes roaming the sky for the shapes of maidens or lions or pairs of fish, a third light flashes across this dark firmament, and we are overcome. To be given a third wish makes of this night a legend, a myth. 3 right intentions stacked like stones could change everything. Turn the world to dust, turn the world to light, turn our bodies into altars for giving our souls to the divine. And so we wish, and this final wish feels like destiny, as familiar and surprising as the shape of a smooth river stone in the hand. We finish the whiskey and the jar is us, empty, clear-hearted, purified with tiny sips of harsh, sweet liquid fire. And in the morning, I wake early, Stand over the cold pile of white wood ash. I look up at the sky, a low ceiling of Appalachian mist. I think about my wishes, but I cannot remember their substance. Only the primal shape of longing remains. And this too feels like a kind of fate, the closing of so many doors, or losing a trail and getting lost in the forest, or perhaps the opening of a large and marvelous gate, the threshold of all thresholds, carrying us from one state of being to another. Nothing to do but be, and be wary of every false thing that distracts from the slow, rhythmic longing that, when the oceans dry up and the sun flares out, will guide us back to where it all began. Thank you.
Thank you, Elliot. And thank you to the national parks and state parks for, I think, as you said, those large, marvelous gates that they offer. It's a wonderful piece. Tell us again the title of the prose poem.
It's titled This Tangible Earth.
Wonderful. Terrific piece. Thank you for sharing it. Thanks for being here from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, USA. It's Elliot White. Let's turn the mic now to and towards Sterling McKee. Sterling is currently based, I think just recently arrived in Chicago, Illinois, USA. Sterling is a spoken word poet, originally from Coatesville, I think, Pennsylvania, who studied communications and media at Kutztown University in Berks County, Pennsylvania, USA, and completed his degree last year, 2020, as a first-generation college graduate. He's involved with the Lehigh Valley-based nonprofit known as the Hayden Films Institute, which is geared towards connecting and supporting student filmmakers in their drive to make an indelible impact in today's world. And as I say, he recently relocated to Chicago. So Sterling, it's good to have you here with us. Glad you could make it. And the mic is yours.
I'm actually moving to my apartment right now.
That's great. Well, thank you for being here.
Yeah, no problem. I just want to take a few minutes. So if I have to hop off, that's why I could move in. But okay. I was thinking about the theme being Earth Day. But I think the most important part of the earth is the people that inhabit it. A lot of my poems are written about the mindset of like the things that people go through on a day-to-day basis, whether that's mental health, or those situations like that. I know for me, I actually was living down in Maryland for about 3 years. And during the summertime, especially during 2020, I would go down to the Chesapeake Bay, especially when the pandemic, you couldn't really do much of anything. So I would just go out there multiple times just to sit and just to be a part of nature and just listen to the waves, listen to the birds and everything. So some of these poems were written last year. They're about people, but they were inspired like while I was in that space of just being in nature. So this one is called Joe's Cage. Joe's Cage is actually from the movie. What's the name of the show? I forget the name of the show. It's a great Netflix show, but that's where I got the idea from. So here we go. I shed a million tears, but yet my eyes still remain dry, devoid of all sense of emotion or empathy. My heart wonders why it remains in a box, an attempt to rectify the years of damage and turmoil. She's better off in solitude, because the pain of another heartbreak will most certainly kill her. Love is a prison, but you confused it with feelings of happiness and joy. It's a reality you haven't seen yet, or perhaps you never will. I'll let you out one day. And that was Joe's Cage. And I have another one over here. Give me 1 second. And this one is called 6 Feet. I wonder what I would look like in a coffin. The old me will wonder. Into madness, confusion. I truly wish I knew the answer. Sometimes it's better to deceive yourself into believing you're okay, when the reality is you. I guess I'm trying to say that mental health is important to some. I wish I could say all, but that would just be generalizing the masses. We take off, but the plane is on fire, and the runway has turned into snow. I sit in the cockpit crying and laughing because I don't know which extreme hurts more. Oh wait, I'm sorry. I've said too much. The elephant in the room is actually just my black soul trying to find my body. Maybe it's true. We don't care until they're gone. But for now, I'll continue to shoot my shot with my heart. Maybe some chemistry will form between her and my mind. Bury my memory. Leave the body to rot. My soul is tired and my eyes are dried. My heart no longer pumps blood. I no longer breathe the free air of sanity. I just want the pain to be over. And I have one last one over here. Now, this one is actually inspired because I'm actually a big Star Wars fan. So this one is called Order 66 Operation Knife. Maybe Anakin was right. Perhaps the Jedi were evil. The hypocrisy of an age long gone. Perhaps Sidious was right. You were a part of their plot, a pawn in your own demise, the bane of my existence, or the concept of life itself. Truthfully, I'm just rambling through my fandom and my thoughts. Perhaps I'm more Sith than Jedi, more Malcolm than Martin, more Stalin than Marx, more pain than happiness. It is of no concern to me. In the end, you go to sleep. But do you wake up and live? Or do you just go through the motions, the monotonous nature of the human condition? Maybe I am a pessimist. That would make me more Baldwin, if not nothing more than a confused soul navigating this unique environment. I'm just rambling. Because if I keep it in, my brain will seek the peace of a shotgun, or the solace of a blade, or the silent nature of the water below. Okay, so a brief background about those three. I'm very big on mental health, especially in the Black and minority communities. I think with my experiences in that, I feel like those subjects are kind of taboo and they aren't talked about enough. So for me, I just wanted, like, when I'm writing or when I'm in that creative mindset, I want to give people a window into what it's like for those people who really face mental health or who may not have the proper resources to go through, those in healthy matters. So I think that's just my big thing. I think for me, I use nature, like being outside, as like my writing space, just a chance to just breathe, just recenter myself. So yeah, I think.
Great, Sterling. Thank you so much for speaking up and out and so powerfully. One of your poems, the last one, talked about, I'm just rambling. Well, keep rambling. Those are wonderful pieces. And even though you've moved to Illinois, to Chicago, I think I can speak on behalf of Berks Bards. Hopefully you'll maintain contact with Berks Bards, because I know that they would love to continue to feature your powerful, powerful voice. So please do, if you can,
Of course.
stay connected.
No problem.
Thank you so much for being here. And I don't know if you can see the chat, but you've gotten some good chat comments. And then after each one of your poems, a lot of people were lifting up hearts and thumbs and all sorts of cool things, signaling their support and interest in your work. So keep going.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So our next wonderful poet to feature is Elizabeth Dodd. Elizabeth teaches poetry, creative nonfiction, and literature and environment courses at Kansas State University in Kansas, USA, where she is a university distinguished professor. She's the author of 6 books, including Archetypal Light, which is poems, and Horizons Lens, which is essays. With Derek Sheffield and Simmons Bunton, she co-edited Dear America, Letters of Hope, Habitat, Defiance, and Democracy, a collection of poems and essays published last year, 2020. Her essay collections, In the Mind's Eye, won the Best Book Award from the Association of the Study of Literature and Environment. And she's a nonfiction editor for terrain.org, a very popular online journal, it's actually the oldest online journal of place-based writing. Her poems and essays have recently appeared in journals including Tin House, the Laurel Review, the Fourth River, the Iowa Review, and Places journals, as well as anthologies such as Poetics for the More Than Human World and The Tallgrass Reader. She lives in Flint Hills region, the Flint Hills region of Kansas, USA, and serves on the Board of Trustees for Audubon of Kansas. So it's a delight to have you with us today, and we'll turn the mic over to you.
Well, thank you, Hiram. Thank you for hosting us. I'm glad to meet all of you. I'm not from Pennsylvania, but I grew up in Southern Ohio, which is part of the same hardwood forest and coal country of Greater Appalachia. And I'm imagining maybe the trillium is blooming right now for some of you in Pennsylvania.
And the Jack in the Pulpits.
And Jack in the Pulpits, thank you. So I thought I would read a few poems today, exploring our connection to the more than human world, a phrase that we've taken from the phenomenologist philosopher David Abram, who likes to talk about the way our senses are the portals to the world, but we also touch the world in so many ways. So when it goes well, it's an I-thou relationship. When it goes badly, it goes badly. With the most recent virtual summit of world leaders thinking about climate change, we might remember the world hasn't had a colder than historical average winter since the mid-1980s. And so even though it's April, I'm going to read some poems that have snow in them and think a little bit about winter. So the first of these is called Cold Frozen January Next Comes In. That's a line taken from the early American poet Anne Bradstreet, her poem, The Four Seasons. And there's a frozen river in it. It's the river that I walked on in the winter of 1977 in Southern Ohio. So Cold Frozen January next comes in. This morning, one suburban turkey stands midway between my window and the neighbor's dryer vent. His soul patch feathers flutter as he cranes his neck to watch me back. When I went out to clear the driveway, I found piss ice plastered on a tree. It's trickster coyote, blue shifting scent marks in a blizzard wind. There's a regular wildlife highway in the undeveloped woods behind the house. A snarl of tracks and scat threads past old rolls of wire fencing and cicada husks of rusting trucks. I'm sick of the president, sick of the news. So I walk down where the half-dry creek makes lazy river S-curves, slicked with luge run glaze. Where a deer crashed through the hollow ice, I stop. It's like a doll-sized room beneath a broken roof. The herniated polar vortex unwinds to lob another cold front, while a hemisphere away, wildfires burn forests rasped by drought. And I remember winter 40 years ago, when school closed and the river froze, and we walked across that still and craggy surface with no idea how the world was changing, the chemistry just then becoming visible while our breath hung in the air. And my next poem is called Boson Particles, Light Snow. It comes out of a Christmas bird count here in the eastern third of Kansas, where we get an awful lot of snow geese. And so watching snow geese in the field of winter and thinking about the relationship between the very small particles of this universe and the larger particles as well. Boson particles, light snow. I have given up trying to count all the snow geese. The world slides past my skin however it will. Juncos move through the dull grass, cloaked like the solstice in black and pale gray. Last week, I walked to the watershed's crest, lay down in tall grass in the solar wind. Maybe there's only one principal story telling itself at the speed of light. And then, and then, and then. Who is it listening? Darkness like water pools under my ribs. Let this be enough, a few flakes adrift in the full field of flight. And this poem is called Mirror Neurons. And mirror neurons, of course, are the part of the brain that allows us to identify with others. And mirror neurons are so important in our ability to communicate, perhaps with other human beings, but perhaps also with the more than human world. The central image in this poem was a kayak trip that I took, very small kayak trip in a local river and reservoir. And it was the first day of dove season. And there were all of these feathers on the water that looked almost like little floating pieces of ice, which began some of the chain of associational imagery in the poem. But as I paddled closer, the scene became clearer to me. Mirror neurons. In a high mountain tarn, the snowpack was melting into exquisite small bodies of winter. I sat down to study. Adrift in midsummer, I sank down to remember. I was lost in the long, last alpine look of those floating forms, like so many white feathers spread once on the river's placid backwater, back home in the rain shadow plains. Like the day, I leaned into Alaska's offshore wind, watching through my binoculars seal pups balanced on platelets of ice who watched back. On the river, I paddled the kayak into the scatter of feathers and stopped. Droplets counting the seconds, the minutes, the feathers were doves' wings, whole skins ripped from the gripless dangle of their feet. The paddle paused in my hands. I remembered the ice, licked by photons' quantumnal breath. When I tell you, are you lifting your hand like me to touch the near bones, like me, between heart and throat? And this last poem is called Recursion. The way one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And so this Earth Day week, I want to remember once sitting on a mountaintop in Colorado, watching a cascade of elk over the central divide of the continent. So that is this recursion. In the moment on the mountain's crest, west facing, thinking it might be time to turn back, I saw their far dark forms against a distant snowfield, distance recalled now in memory's warm oxytocinal hush. But no one was with me to tell, look at the elk, who were crossing a bridge at the air's edge, when I sank suddenly down, counting their bodies, the line of the movement I was counting, the years young kicking up snow, falling back, just as quick, while I caught its glint, 70 elk, and still the mind of the herd kept coming, all stepping down, serration's insistence on uplift. On the divide, alone, I heard some of them calling out wildly, out calling. Thank you. Thank you for
Thank you,
listening.
Elizabeth. Uh, I put in the chat, I'm just captivated by the whole notion of the cascade of elk. Terrific poems, bringing us both the ice and water and natural world that you've visited as well as imagined, and we appreciate you bringing that aspect of Earth into the circle today. Thanks for being here from Kansas, mid-US. We really appreciate that as well. As we round out the hour here, I'll read 3 short poems. By way of introduction, my name is Hiram LaRue, and I've recently learned that my next collection of poems will be published by a group called Atmosphere Press. I'm also going to post a notice in the chat room. Many of you have responded, and many of you, in fact, have poems already posted on the Poetry X Hunger website. But in case you don't, please consider sending us a poem about hunger for possible posting on that website, where we now have about 250 poems by poets around the world speaking back to hunger. So here are 3 poems. We've heard today poems from the forest, from the personal point of view, the people point of view, from the ice fields, from the parks, and from the elks. Here's one envisioning, try to imagine yourself stepping out on a front porch and looking up. It's called Quiets Come. Quiets come. All is up. Yes, all is sky. All is wings and tops and rise. All is up, those branches hum and whistles high. How quiets come. Or beams of clouds, this world of still that flies towards yes and shall, above what will and all, where most of more calls blowing. And this one is a look back in wonder. And the reason I'm offering it today is because I consider Johnny Chapman to have been an early environmentalist. Johnny Chapman was also known as Johnny Appleseed. He lived from the late 1700s to the mid 1800s, and he was a near fabled planter of apple seeds over much of the northern US in the early 1800s. This piece appeared recently in West Trade Review. It's titled Losing Birthdays. One of my grandmothers grew deep red geraniums on her front porch for everyone strolling by in the summer to admire. My other grandmother trained a rose bush of palest pinks and heavenly scent up over her back door. I was lost. And so there is how just now these fields of sunrise forget such birthdays, while blackbirds pick and ticks climb up. What good am I at taking such things inside, these deepest loves and smallest sounds? And I've been told that wherever he went, my imaginary uncle caused people to shyly grin. He was strange, they all said, but people loved him anyway for his dreamy ways. He was just like Johnny Appleseed, who I still believe dropped barefoot seeds on every spot that could be found, poor or steep, year by year, from here to then. And last piece is another poem that's in love with the view up. And this poem appeared in a journal called Orbis. The poem's titled Magic. The stars in your chest, the sounds of their glow, their flash blink wings, their touch top skies. These leaps towards light, these grateful, urging, holy stars in your chest, and now in your throat. Their voices of beams, even into your heart and beyond. Their blaze, each star that starts in your chest and spins out from there, spins you as nothing else can, as magic comes true, with your chances so inside and out, with each and every star so over the moon. So folks, I believe that brings us to the close, 2 minutes over our allotted hour. But if there are a couple of quick questions that anyone would like to ask, that would be great. Otherwise, we will bid everyone, including our friends from Ireland, adieu, and see each other in the Zoom sphere and other spots. But any questions or thoughts from anyone about the series of Earth-focused poems today, sponsored by Berks Bards?
Hiram, I'll just jump in right now if you
Sure.
don't mind, and remind everybody that on May 6th, we're doing a first Thursday with the poetry of Diane Wilburn Parks. So maybe you can join us for that. That's going to be a 6 p.m. Zoom session. And, you know, we're just so happy that we could do this again. We did this Zoom last year for the first time, and we thought we'd try to repeat it. And yay.
Yay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and in case you don't know Diane Wilburn Parks's work, I know many of you do, but if you don't, you're in for a treat, you and your ears, if you would like to join Berks Bards for her featured reading next month. Anything else for the good of the cause? I don't know if Liz is still on. I don't think Liz is still on, so. Well, I will thank everyone for coming in from as far away as Kansas and Ireland and, of course, Pennsylvania. We've also got friends here from, I believe Frank is from Santa Fe, Frank Malcone, and Patty did make it in. Patty Ross made it in, which is great. I'm just looking around the room. Yeah. So Gregory, I'm not sure where you are from, or Rob, where you're from. And Chris and Rick, I don't know where you're from. Sorry about that. But it's good to have everyone here.
And I want to thank you, Hiram, for hosting. It's very kind of you to do that. Thank you.
Sure, it's fun. It's good to hear everyone's voice. Well, we'll see everyone in the Zoomosphere and have a good rest of the weekend. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.